welcome back to the channel. Welcome to yet another stunning day up in Northumberland. We're at Beadnell this morning. It's the Saturday the 3rd of June. We've got, as I say, a glorious day, glorious conditions. Tide's currently going out. It's 7:25. Low water is about 8:45, so I'm going to fish a couple hours down, a couple hours up, see if I can pull out a codlin or a wrasse. We've got probably not a big tide, but bigger than medium. It's probably about 1.1, something like that on the tide scale. The slight issue I've got today, if you watch the channel, you'll know that the best conditions for this sort of fishing, flat, calm, gin clear water. We've had a bit of northerly sea blow up during the week, and there is still a little bit of a residual swell, and even here where you don't usually get much colour on the water, there is a touch. So I was going to fish further onto the open, well, I mean it's all the open coast, but further around the corner to the north of Beadnell Point, where the skiers face due east and they go out kind of directly into the sea. But I got down there earlier and there was just a little bit too much bump on for what I wanted. So I've come in behind the harbour with it being residual northerly. I've got Beadnell Point, I don't know, a quarter of a mile, third of a mile up there. So I'm hoping I can just get tucked into this little area here and just chuck into some of the kelp beds. This area here, you might have seen a video last year, because of the geology of the rocks, it goes down into the water fairly steeply, so you're into a pretty reasonable depth of water even within 20-30 yards, to be honest. So actually, to be fair, if you want to do some of this sort of fishing but you weren't sure, behind the harbour at Beadnell, it's a safe mark. If you go further along where the houses start, you're not going to get cut off. The ground's further down, you've got that sort of stringy weed. It is a little bit tricky to walk on at times, but you just got to watch what you're doing. But it's quite a safe venue, and it offers you deep access into kelp where there are codlin and wrasse to be had. So it's worth giving a shot if you're thinking about trying it. You do, of course, it is a commercial harbour. There are boats there. There's quite a few pots down here in front of us, so you've just got to kind of watch what you're doing. But what I'm going to do this morning, my first bait's been in about 25 minutes. Got a big crab bait on. Had a couple of rattles, but I suspect it might just be off crabs or even a lobster. So the sea is forecast to drop as the day goes on, so I'm going to just have maybe half a dozen casts along here, and then I might shift to one of the other skiers if the sea settles a little bit. You can still catch fish when the sea on, but ideally I prefer it to be calmer for this sort of fishing. I've got some pots to me left, so I'm just going to fire this one out basically in the direction of Dunsmore Castle. I'm not going to blast this, just so you might ask why I'm basically sat on the ground. It's because yesterday I packed the car, and it's fair to say I was severely hungover. Stayed up with my parents last night. They don't live far from here. Got out the car last night, drove up here, and thought I've forgotten the camera tripod. So I'm having to try and make do with what I can today. Not the easiest, but hopefully we'll get on all right. That was compounded by the fact that when I opened the box, I've got 3 rig wallets. one with sort of loop rigs, scratching rigs, and variations of pulley, either with a knotless knot or not. Of course, the one rig wallet I left in my garage is, of course, the one with my pulley rigs in. I do have 4 knotless knot pulleys already wound up, sat in my box, but really they're hound rigs because they've got a 5/0 chinook on a knotless knot, and just out of sheer laziness and desperation to get a bait in the water, I've put the first one out, but it does have a pretty big exposed chinook on it above the bait, and I'm not really keen on throwing hooks like that into ground like this. So the next rig, I've nipped I've nipped the hook off, and I've just gone with a 4/0 ultra sharp mustard Viking. And all I've done is, I'll show you in a bit, I've just tied a little stop knot just with mono just above the hook, just stop the bait flying up the hook length when I'm casting. Gear is me trusty HST Evo, 13'10", rated 48 ounces, good stiff rod for this sort of fishing. It's treated as well. The other problem I have with that rod is that you might have seen, oh God, my knees, I think I'm still a little bit hungover. You might have seen the previous video where I fished in Newton. I've got into a habit after a couple of rod issues where I start to put Vaseline on my spigot just to avoid it to stop it from sticking. I was fishing at Newton, gorgeous day, put some Vaseline on, got back to the car, could not get the rod apart. So I've just had to leave it. That was a fortnight ago. It's been sat in my parents' garden for 2 weeks. Came up last night, didn't have much strength the way I was feeling. Plus I was on the boat last week and I've nicked my finger and I don't know if I've got something stuck in it, so it's a bit swollen. I can't get a grip with it. Anyway, so I'm having to drive around with a rod sticking through the sunroof. So it's just a bit of a series of calamities at the minute, to be honest. So anyway, but I am giving me trusty Bullseye a run out. I've had this reel for a couple of years now, probably longer. Doesn't get that much use, but I thought, why not? I'll give it a run out. It's a nice bit of kit, Shimano Bullseye. The line lay isn't a patch on the Aerotechnium, but to be honest, I'm not looking for maximum distance here today. The good thing I do like about the Bullseye, and not everybody agrees on this, it's only got a 3.5-to-1 gear ratio, which means that it's got plenty of torque, because it's not, I sometimes find with braid on higher retrieve fixed spools, when you're winding in, especially if you've got a fish on, it just pulls the rod tip over, but with the retrieve on that being a bit lower, it's a bit more torquey and it's great for pulling fish through. So that's loaded with 55-pound braid and an 80-pound braid shock leader tied with a 12-turn uni knot. So, cracking morning, the seas, as I say, a little bit more of a residual than I'd like, but I'm just going to have a couple of casts in each little spot and shift along. Right. See if we can catch something. I've had a little bit of interest on you. I'm just going to make sure I've got something solid under my feet. I've had a few knocks, but they're not those convincing sort of really powerful lunges that you get off with half decent fish. Feels like it could be more crustacean related. Get this wound in, see what's going on. That has gone incredibly fast into a snag. So what I'm going to do, get my cloth, wrap it round, hopefully pull it out, and of course my braids now. The kelp. How's your luck? I think I've got something on there still. Yep. Oh well. And that is why, even though I'm using plain sinkers, that's why I use a rotten bottom. Perfectly illustrated right there. On those days when I am occasionally organised, believe it or not, it sometimes does happen. As well as my rigs, I'll just tie up half a dozen rotten bottoms onto my sinkers. These are 6 ounce. That's just a length, £40 amnesia, a couple of overhand knots in it. And what I like to do, as you'll have probably seen before, but I'll tell you again for anybody that's new to the channel, I like to tie my knots. Just a little bit of movement on that rod tip to the side of the sinker and onto the side of the rotten bottom. And what it means is, just clip that on. That'll just sit nicely like that. And I personally like to get my pliers and just narrow the angle of that rotor a little bit, because I think sometimes, I don't know, they're just not quite narrow enough for me. And if you're casting, especially if you're power casting, you definitely don't want stuff your sinkers flying off when they're only attached to a weak bit of line. Just seen a bit of movement in that rod, but maybe just a little bit of the swell. I've just learned something there. You've probably just seen us lose that sinker, but I got the rest back. And I was a bit reluctant to put the first rig on, with it being a hound rig, because I was worried that those possibly would result in everything getting snapped off, because it's a slightly heavier gauge hook. But actually you can see there, that has bent a little bit with that braid, which has kind of given us a bit more confidence to get it back out, because obviously if you've got 2 hooks, you've got twice the chance of hooking the fish, you've got twice the chance of getting snagged. But so all I'm going to do is just gently bend that back, slightly offset that to get a bit more hooking power, and that'll do. And as for that bit of crab, that'll just get pushed up the hook length, and I'll just lash another bit on next to it. Really doesn't matter if it's going out and you've just got fresh stuff lashed on. It makes no difference. This sort of fishing, there's no finesse in it at all. As long as you've got gear that's good enough to stand up to it, strong braid, strong line, decent end tackle and a sturdy rod, whack a lump of crab out and wait for the bite. That's pretty much it. Just getting another nice crab bait on. I'll peel the legs, hook those onto the bottom, and then just lay them up the side of the bait. So that's that baited up with the knotless knot. What I'm going to do, I'll probably have maybe 3 casts here. This next one I'm going to push it out a little bit further. What I generally find, if you've got the ability to move around like I have today, 3, maybe 4 casts, and if you haven't had a touch, I personally think it's safe to say there's probably not a lot there. So we'll have 3 or 4 casts, and I think I'll maybe shift along possibly 50, 100 yards, have a chuck out there, see if we can pull anything out. Got about 45 minutes to low water. Just see the top of the kelp starting to show here at the bottom of the rock, so tide is pushing out. Cracking morning though, yet again. Weather's absolutely superb. Bright sunshine, 0 wind, absolute belter. Getting what looks to be a bit more of an encouraging Bit of interest here. Yeah, something's having a little look. Go on. That felt a bit more fish-like, I have to say. Now I'm going to leave that for a minute. Something's having a little wrestle with it, but it's just not quite there. Right, I'm done with this spot. I've been here for an hour and 3/4, couple of knocks, but it's been pretty dreadful. So I'm going to get probably halfway between here and the point, have 2 or 3 casts, and then I might even finish on the point because it gives us the option to cast sort of northeast and south, and hopefully salvage something, because part 1 of this session, as in the part between the ebb and low water, which is now, has been absolutely fruitless. Well, I've moved probably about 150, 200 yards along from the point. Got quite a convenient pipe here which sort of juts out, so I'm just going to take advantage of that while I haven't got some other gear with us. Get another bait peeled up here. Just even standing on that pipe looking down, I can tell there is a reasonable amount of colour in the water here still, and I'm beginning to think a bit of swell, bit of colour possibly isn't going to do us any favours. But I'll have another half a dozen casts or so. Many years ago, when I first started boat fishing with it, we used to launch out at Beadnell and come along the back of the point here, and you're into deep water very quickly. So I'm just hoping, with there being a little bit of sea, that extra depth just takes a bit of the movement off and just helps settle things a little bit. Something having a little go at that. Little sharp rattles which have got to look more of a rasp, but equally possibly a edible crab or a lobster. There's something having a little look. I'm going to investigate this. It has knocked a few times. Nah, nothing. Right. Hit this a little bit harder. See if some distance does the trick. Come on. That certainly isn't going to help things. A lot of them about in these parts because we're only a couple of miles from the Farn Island, so at least he's swimming the other way though. Give it a few more minutes to get this other rig baited up. We're about nearly an hour into the flood now, so just hoping that a little bit of turn of the tide, bit of a change up in movement might just help to bring something in. I tend to not recast as regularly with this sort of fishing. I just put bigger, lumpier, scenty baits out and give them half an hour, maybe sometimes a little bit longer, and just let the fish find them. Because if there's any fish in the vicinity, they will find that. But so far, it ain't looking like there are any fish in the vicinity. Definitely getting a much better bite here all of a sudden. That was a couple of proper knocks there. Come on. Getting very, very impatient today. Give that a minute. That was encouraging. Just had another decent bite there. Oh, yep. Come on. Possibly had the look of a rasp. Rattle that. Yeah, it's rattling away there. Come on. Oh, I've lost it. I don't believe that. Ah, man. Well, frustratingly, there was definitely a fish having a go at that. Pulled into it. Fast hold. Lost me hook length. But to take an optimistic stance on matters, at least I've had a definitive bite from a fish. Right, so I thought after losing that snood, what I'd do is just share with you a little method that I use for this sort of fishing, just to keep me bait in place rather than using as a pennel. So all I do, fishing with 4-row mustard, Viking, ultra points, always use these for rough ground. Plenty of strength, but they will bend out. And what I do, diameter, same break and strain, mono, 50-pound amnesia. And all I do, I just make a 3-turn grinner on the line. 1, 2, 3. I don't pull it tight until I get it roughly where I want it, because it can kink the line. And it's just literally, the majority of my bait will sit on the hook. I'm not using lengthy baits, they're quite lumpy, as you've probably seen. So all I do, give that a little bit of lubrication. I just pull that tight. And that'll give you just enough grip when you cast, just to push that down, and it'll just keep your bait in place when you're casting. So I tend to just leave a little bit of line on. Obviously put your tag ends back in your box. Don't leave them on the rocks. And it's just a very simple and easy little bait stop that'll keep your gear from, your bait from slipping up the line, and just reduces the chance of snags if you just want to use one hook like I am. Right, let's get this baited up. Appears to be devoid of life out there. This is my last cast, my last crab. With the tide coming in, I'm going to take a final gamble, because there's a bit more depth in front of us. And just on the off chance, I'm going to plop it short, because this fishing isn't all about distance at all. So let's just see what I can do. Last chance saloon, come on. Finally, it's literally my last cast here. Just had a decent bite. Yep, something having a go there. Getting a lot of slap again. Yes, yep, I've got it. It's not a big fish, but it's a fish. It's diving down a little bit. Well, I don't believe it. Last cast, last roll of the dice. Managed to hook a fish. He's a lovely.
Nice one.
You all right?
All right. Proper kelp, you know.
It is, isn't it? Lovely. Well, literally last cast, I managed to winkle out a proper lively kelpie. He's probably, well, what is he? He's about 44. Absolutely perfectly marked, look at that. And he was just lip hooked. He's full of life. Someone's had a little go at him there, maybe a seal or something like that. But yeah, fabulous fish. I'm really pleased to end the session on a fish like that, so let's get it back. Well, that's the end of the session. That was my last cast, and I'm very, very pleased to have picked out a fish, because I thought it was going to be a blank session. It was that was literally right at the death. That fish came just lip hooked, went back perfectly, lovely marks, nice lively codling. So got to relieve. I'm quite relieved to have caught that. In fact, I'm very relieved, because I thought I was going to come home with nothing to show for it. But anyway, way out to meet a couple of pals, have a few beers in Newcastle this afternoon. Sun's out, so not a bad way to start the day. But anyway, thanks very much for watching. Hopefully you've enjoyed. Hopefully you've seen a bit of Beadnell in all its glory. Hope you're all getting out there and getting a few fish. Until the next one, tight lines, keep fishing. We'll see you soon.